Good day, folks. This is Soul, and today we're going to design a fix for PvE rewards in the World of Warcraft. Again, I'm back with a few new ideas and what I hope to be a clear-looking vision of what I'm trying to accomplish here with PvE rewards. Now, if you're new here, I do this sort of thing for fun, which is to critique parts of the World of Warcraft and I offer up suggestions. In today's video, we're going to get a bit more in-depth with some specifics and theory crafting with this fangled idea. As usual, of course, hit the like button and subscribe for more of this sort of thing if you're into it. And as a reminder, I'll have the video divided, divvied up into sections for your enjoyment and brevity. Let's start by talking about what I perceive as problems in WoW's current PvE game. And to be very specific, I mean the systems that get us gearing at max level. Endgame content, from Titan Forging to the upgradable gear from Korthia and Mythic Plus to like the socket and conduit upgrades. With these things come numerous challenges that players face against this sort of progression, multiplied if they happen to have alts. The problems, of course, they stretch much further than this, and there's no catch-all phrase to describe it. It's more than simply, they don't respect our time. And we're not going to even fully agree that these are problems. I just hope to sell the idea that we can have something better than what we have now. Over the years, the game has been inconsistent for the sake of, Blizzard running one experiment after another, where with each major patch, we have to learn and then relearn how to look at the game, and I disagree with the approach. Not everyone has a problem with this, but I think the game should be in a place where very few to no one has a problem with understanding something like the path to gearing. Meanwhile, I'm very supportive of Blizzard taking new and wild approaches to quest content and obtaining rewards unrelated to power. Because even if the current approaches might not be universally loved, that's not really part of today's conversation. On another note, since the WoW team keeps trying new things, and by that I mean designing and engineering and rebalancing one new system after another, my opinion, the end result, it's not very polished. Benthic gear in patch 8.2, it happened to be best in slot for raids in some cases. The Covenant set in patch 9.0 had pretty much no teeth after a few short weeks. Korthia gear in 9.1, well, it started out okay, but thanks to Renown, it took so long to upgrade through means outside of our control that it was hard to appreciate the gear upgrades months after the patch began. And these kinds of inadequacies leave a permanent impression for players who want to be here, who want to be present for the new content. Now, someone who jumps into Shadowlands right now in patch 9.15, I think they're going to have a great time with the gearing systems, without much of anything holding them back. The fixes in 9.15 have been very welcome, but for some folks who were here for the journey, it's too little too late, because we can't simply replace that bad experience that we had. The gearing progression doesn't cover everyone's needs adequately either. Some people don't like being time-gated. Some people don't want to feel like they're hopelessly falling behind either. Some people want their alts to have near equal opportunities as their mains. And this is a very incomplete set of bullet points, and I'm sure that you folks at home and elsewhere can add plenty to this list, but this isn't a video about complaining, it's about exploring possibilities. The goals of today's exercise are simple. It's to make an evergreen progression system that, apart from balance tweaks, isn't going to change. It's going to be here for the rest of the game. We're going to consider the needs of everyone who participates, whether someone plays a few hours a week or every day. We're going to give flexibility with respect to when players jump in. We're going to make the progression compelling enough to want to log in for, but also make it forgiving enough that players don't feel pressured to log in for or else. In previous talks, I've talked up the Valor point system, and today, it's no different. In my opinion, Valor is by far the most effective approach to developing a strong post-game progression for players that's so familiar, it's kind of hard to get sick of it, really. First off, just the mention of Valor to you folks, to WoW fans of many years, it's going to bring back some memories. But here's a reminder, just in case. It's a currency you get from doing PvE content, and a vendor with stuff to buy. That's it. It's pretty simple and effective. But we can do so much more with it these days thanks to lessons learned over the years. Let's start with the Valor itself. Back in the day, Valor was earned from daily content and dungeons and raids and at various amounts, and it had a weekly cap, all calculated to curb some of the more degenerate behavior out there. But the system was not without its flaws, notably feeling left behind if you didn't Valor cap like every single week or day. Today, Valor feels like an afterthought. In fact, it was added in a patch mostly to support Mythic Plus content and Covenant Calling, and it comes from dungeons and Covenant Callings, and as of this patch, it added a loot box. It can be used for upgrades of certain gear, and it has no cap. It's sort of a mess right now. In this new reimagining of the Valor system, Valor will drop from almost all PvE activities, from raid bosses to the end of dungeon clears to the daily heroic, to killing rares and finding treasures too. In fact, here's a simple chart to give you a sense of what the experience would be like. Now, before we continue, I want to be super clear that these are just example numbers that I'm showing you. I'm sure you smarty pants people out there are going to be quick to point out a flaw and then use that to shoot down any credibility this idea might have. But guess what? I never had any credibility in the first place. Anyway, example chart. I created values based on different accomplishments, like killing a raid boss, to clearing a dungeon, to even finding a rare or a treasure, as mentioned. Then I created a few sample profiles of different player types to see just how much Valor would be earned over the course of a week. Let's start with someone who doesn't play too much, but they happen to raid. They're not quite a raid logger, but almost. So they cleared the raid, plus the world bosses. They got 2 daily heroic bonuses and something equivalent of 1 or 2 days of daily quest content. Based on this activity, this player earned 890 Valor for the week. Now, for someone who doesn't play at a very high skill level, but maybe enjoys playing on a daily basis, let's take a look at this profile. They completed Raid Finder difficulty, whoop-de-doo. They run the daily heroic each and every day, and over the course of the week, they completed 28 world quests and dailies, and maybe they found like 40 treasures and 40 rares for a total of 1,595 Valor. Note that the biggest sources of Valor come from small group content that takes advantage of a daily bonus, with more from solo content and exploration. But now how about the profile of a career Mythic Plus person who considers all other content beneath them, maybe? In a world where the Great Vault is still a thing, no doubt that this player type would complete at least 10 Mythic dungeons. That's only going to equate to 400 Valor, which sort of sucks, right? But consider the profile of someone else pure, like a pure raid logger, who only clears the 9-boss raid without the world bosses. That's only 450 Valor, which again isn't very much. And then consider again the person who just does 3 dailies a day for 7 days. That's 420 Valor. Again, it's not a huge difference. Finally, well, we're missing a lot of important context like, what's the weekly cap? Or what can you buy with Valor? And how much do these cost? So who cares right now? The takeaway here is to give a bit of equivalence to dungeons, raids, and outdoor questing. It's not perfectly equal, and there's an endless spectrum of combinations between these activities, but no one activity is meant to seem vastly superior to the other. We're not done though, of course. This chart gives an example of how much Valor you might earn in a week running expansion content like Shadowlands, current expansion content. But what if a player logs in and they don't feel like doing a round of Korthia, and maybe they just feel like farming for transmog instead? Cool, so off they go down to Ulduar, and they smash its 14 bosses. And then maybe they opt to do a few more raids. So they pop the 5 bosses in Trial of the Crusader, and the 12 bosses in Icecrown Citadel. So if we do those activities, what do we get today? We just get some transmog and a pretty low amount of raw gold. Yay. It's not great, but that's what we're used to. But in this new Valor system, that player is also going to earn some Valor from those raids. 310 Valor from a short hour or two just running some old content. That's because the new Valor system will acknowledge these activities game-wide and separate Valor rewards between current and legacy content. The distinction is pretty simple. Anything from the current expansion will offer the full value of Valor. Anything from the previous expansions, from, Vanilla to Lich King to Cataclysm to Battle for Azeroth, it's going to offer a far reduced amount of Valor. Now you might think of this as too much Valor relative to running current content, and that's totally okay. It's up for discussion, totally. But Valor from all content, that is the big thing I'm trying to sell. And here goes nothing. This alone totally changes the way that we look at the game. Every repeatable quest and dungeon and rare and raid boss and etc. has a value that can be put towards current endgame rewards. If this philosophy were to be applied now, players can run current content for the fastest path to cap because, duh, why wouldn't the game be designed to funnel players to the latest thing? But this new design is encouraging players to the new content instead of locking them into it. Now this is the bad example, but imagine if Anima dropped game-wide, everywhere, from Shadowlands to like Molten Core to Antorus. Now, sure, you might farm Shadowlands content because that's where you can get the most anima, but you could also do your own thing and still get stuff. This liberates players from having to make this binary choice of working towards one thing or another. With this Valor system, it can be a little bit of both. With endgame progression focused mostly on Valor, we can now design simple bonus events to encourage more engagement. The Mythic Dungeon Weekly event can award bonus Valor from all dungeons Mythic and higher. Time Walking? Cool. Clear a Time Walking dungeon, you get some extra Valor. Time Walking raids? Even more. World Quest event? Cool. More Valor from World Quests. And how about adding a new Legacy Holiday event where you get like double or triple the Valor from older content? And how about throwing more Valor at holiday events like Brewfest, because why not? Now, hearing all of this sounds like Valor is being, thrown around everywhere to the point where it loses its meaning. So let's finally add the context and talk about a Valor cap. A recent Shadowlands hotfix made this conversation very, very interesting though. Lately, the World of Warcraft has embraced the idea of what they call a seasonal cap. In the current Valor system, the cap started at 750 at the start of Season 2 of Shadowlands. Week 2, that total went up by another 750, so now it's 1,500. And in Week 3, it went up again to 2,250, and so on and so forth. This made it so that people who were a few weeks behind could still catch up. It also meant that for career-minded players, they continuously ran into that 750 cap. This felt worse later in the season, not just because of the cap, but because there wasn't anything significant to spend Valor on. But cut to the recent changes. In an announcement, Blizzard said that they would lift the cap, and now it's just gone. This is on top of a Valor point dump added in the recent 9.15 patch, meaning players who exclusively play the dungeon game have a little bit more to do, although I admit that the current vendor/loot box, it's not very exciting. What makes this move exciting doesn't have anything to do with what we have now, but it does set a precedent with a lot of potential. The Valor cap is being taken away roughly 18 weeks after Season 2 of Shadowlands began, because according to the WoW team, the caps just don't mean a whole lot. There's tons of Valor to earn, and there's no need to hold people back who are already at the cap. Just let people play. This is what this fix is trying to tell me, at least. But it also inspires how a new Valor system would work, because now we have this expectation of having a seasonal cap to curb the most degenerate behavior, but once that advantage becomes less impactful, lift the cap, let them farm. This is really cool. Because of this, the season or weekly caps aren't nearly as important as they used to be, because now we have it in our heads, they'll eventually be lifted anyway. Now don't worry, I'm going to talk specifics about the cap itself in a bit, but let's talk about the Valor vendor first. The vendor is going to sell gear tokens just like how Korthia gear is sold in patch 9.15. That's going to mean a token for each and every gear slot. The gear is going to have random secondary stats, it can be upgraded, and for the sake of argument, we'll say that the token itself is account tradable. With regards to account-wide stuff, here's the current thought. At the start of the season, with Valor caps, there's only so much that one can do to funnel their main with Valor gear. And even then, the character that was fed still needs to farm up Valor on that character to upgrade the gear, because I never said that Valor could be transferred, and I don't think I'd want it to be. Of course, this gear will be upgradable. We'll start really simple by saying that this gear will have 3 upgrade levels, where at level 1, it has the equivalent item level of Mythic Dungeon gear. At level 2, it has the equivalent item level to normal raid gear, and at level 3, heroic level raid gear. Maybe having 6 upgrade levels would be better to make your progression feel more incremental, but these are just some starting numbers. And now let's go to the important part, the gear and the upgrade costs. Here's where we can also start playing with the Valor cap. And we'll try working with these numbers first. We'll start with a Valor cap of 1500, 1000 Valor to buy any of the pieces, and we're not going to discriminate on the cost, and I'm just trying to keep it simple here right now. Followed by a flat 500 Valor for each upgrade level. Finally, let's say that after 10 weeks, the season cap is lifted. This mechanism is built in, so there's no patch needed. It's through and through like a time gate that simply expires. So where does that put us? 10 weeks means a maximum of 15,000 Valor that one character can earn while this cap is in place. Now, if it takes 2,000 Valor to both buy and fully upgrade a single piece of gear, in theory, that means a single character can possess 7 pieces of heroic raid gear and 1 piece that's in need of an upgrade. To be honest, I don't know if that's such a bad thing because, my perspective is just one person, and I'd like to hear your thoughts too. Some people will love it, some will hate it, oh well. Now though, let's consider the extreme case that I described earlier. Like, what if someone used a bunch of alts to trade Valor gear to a single character? That means even though week 1 has a Valor cap of 1500, it's going to be possible for a single character to have like 16,000 Valors worth of gear, which is basically a 10-week start. And that's not very fair. So what if the Valor tokens were not account-wide until after the 10-week period? Again, this will be built into the system, so there's no patch needed. It sounds more fair, but let's try to revisit another extreme scenario. One character could just keep banking Valor on one character and bank enough on their alts during this 10-week period. Then when it's over, they buy the tokens, they send them to the main character, and that character would spend all the earned Valor to quickly upgrade. That's not nearly as big of an advantage because, well, that player is just sitting on unspent currency and they're kind of staying down there in the meantime. But this is a smart approach for someone who knows that they'll eventually be interested in getting multiple alts running later in the season and is not in a rush. Now, is that such a terrible thing? I'd like to argue no, not really. And finally, let's think about how long it takes to fully gear a character in Valor gear if this is the only way this person wants to gear. Buying and upgrading a full set of Valor gear will cost 32,000 Valor, and that's if they use both a main and an offhand. In the initial 10-week period, a player will only have access to at most 15,000 Valor. After the cap is lifted, if the player's routine doesn't happen to change and they keep earning that 1,500 Valor per week, that's going to mean another 11 or so weeks to buy and upgrade the remaining pieces. Now, I forgot to admit that sounds like a pretty long time, especially if we consider those who want to play multiple alts. Not everyone is going to gear exclusively with Valor gear, sure, but this is a good starting point for discussing what would make a good fit or what would be the better set of numbers. Now, some of you are like, hey, based on what I'm hearing, I don't really care to farm for Valor because I'm a Mythic Plus or I'm a raiding person and this gear is not worth my time. However, Valor will still have its uses. Obviously, it's going to serve some purpose by filling holes in your itemization in a world of randomness. Think of this as, bad luck protection. You haven't been getting the item that you want, but you can fill it with Valor gear and upgrades in the meantime. Valor will be the currency used to buy socket upgrades and, expansion gimmicks like conduit upgrades. Today in Shadowlands, you're limited to certain content to get this stuff, like, running the Maw, or Torghast, or Korthia to work towards them. In this new Valor system, though, yeah, you're still going to have to put in the work, but at least you have a lot more choices where to apply that work. Finally, to give the min-maxers a bit of love, Valor can be used to sort of warforge any non-Valor piece of gear one time. Think of it like a +3 item level upgrade that you can apply to raid and dungeon and Great Vault drops. It's not much, but it's something to spend Valor on if otherwise you play at such a high level that Valor really has limited uses. So what about alts? What can we do to the Valor system to make it more alt-friendly? Now, I'd like to think that there's already a lot going for people who play multiple alts. Valor tokens can be traded after the 10-week period, which to some extent gives this account-wide currency sort of feel, but stops just short of having account-wide Valor. All characters can earn Valor from a huge variety of sources, which gives alts that many more avenues to progress. And there are occasional events and holidays that also give bonus Valor to distract players from their typical player behavior. So are additional bonuses really necessary? Of course, for the sake of fun, let's say yeah. So here's the most fair idea that I could come up with, and we'll use this as a jumping off point for discussion. What we're going to do is add an account-wide achievement, meaning that all characters on the account will contribute and benefit from this. So as soon as you earn a total of, say, I don't know, like 20,000 Valor across your characters, you'll get an achievement that gives a permanent Valor bonus from all sources. It could be like 10%, 25%, 50%, whatever. So you've got to put in the work. If you have lots of alts, you will be able to activate this achievement sooner, but you've still got to put in the same work as someone with one character. It's just a matter of how fast you want to go. Small caveat though, this achievement only applies to the current season, because at the start of the new season, Valor is going to be zeroed out and converted into gold, like we're used to that, and the achievement bonus will reset. And while we're on that subject, let's talk about what happens at the end of a season. I mentioned zeroing out Valor, so there's that. Also, the previous season's Valor gear can no longer be upgraded. However, a new season Valor set will be available at the vendor, and this will happen every season until the end of WoW time. On top of that, the old Valor set can still be bought, only this set is going to have its cost reduced by a whole lot. This will let people who missed the entire season have an opportunity to at least buy the gear for like transmog. This in fact works as a catch-up for alts, who can spend the first week's worth of Valor buying a bunch of old season's gear to get up to speed. Now let's recap this whole thing. We're trying to cook up a new Valor system as a permanent fixture from season to season, to supplement gearing systems from raids and dungeons, but also to let it stand on its own for players who don't do any organized content. Valor is everywhere, with the most efficient source from the current expansion content, but can also be found in all legacy content to provide a very flexible playstyle. Valor can let you buy upgradable gear and to Warforge non-Valor gear. A temporary season cap is in place to curb edge case behavior, but after a few short months, the reins are let go and players can just farm their faces off. I truly feel like something like this would have been a hit in Shadowlands 9.0. It wasn't so long when people were super upset over the lack of drops in raids, the really low bar of progression in world content, and how the best approach to gearing was to do a lot of PvP first. I think this would have worked really well in Shadowlands 9.1 as well to mostly replace the Korthia loop. I mean, sure, Korthia could still be Korthia, but if its rewards were just tied to a Valor system like this, with built-in account-wide features and a much faster rate of upgrading, I bet people would overall they'd be happier. Now, some of you might be thinking, okay, this is cool, but I don't want to have to just do this season after season with another round of vendor gear and another round of Valor farming because that seems boring. And you're right, it is kind of boring, but that's also the point. By relying on a Valor system that mostly doesn't change, the WoW team can put their creative energy into other features. They can design PvE content without being forced to balance it for rewards that offer player power. We can see a reflection of this design with the Covenant Sanctum. Tons of different activities come from the Sanctums to deliver a somewhat unique experience between each one, and it's not balanced. Like, just look at the Path of Ascension compared to all the other major Covenant activities. None of them give tangible rewards that make our characters stronger, but they're still rewards that, for many, are still worth farming for. The Sanctums are not perfect by any means, but I really like this non-power approach and the attempts to make the experience feel unique because item level isn't a concern here. And as for something like Torghast, just have Torghast drop Valor. Done. I'd love to have some discussions on this topic because this is important for a lot of us. Like, I'd love your input too. The question to ask is simple. Would you play something like this? As I was writing all this up, the answer in my head has been a resounding yes. This would make me excited to play and run content old and new without feeling like my time could be better served elsewhere. But what's missing, or what did I get wrong? Let me know in a comment below. And I want to thank you for watching and listening, and I'll see you in the next thing. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy. Oh God.